In the last video I did say this is a subject that I would probably cover if I made another video, so here it goes. I am very, very disappointed by Labour in terms of how they're approaching welfare at the moment, because I think that they are trying to outgun the Tories, no matter what way they frame it. I think Liz Kendall, as Working Pensions Secretary, and Rachel Reeves, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, are focused on trying to appear hard line. Um, And just like the Tories, they frame it as trying to help people back into work. Now, there's a lot of angles to look at with this, and I'm not going to cover everything, but what I want to focus on is why I think it's wrong, morally, cynical, and just very cruel, actually, to do what they are doing. Now, a few disclaimers here. I'm definitely to the left on this subject. I don't deny that, but I know there are people who abuse the system. That is wrong, right? If people are getting money from the state, um, then it's right that there are some obligations or that they are in a sincere position to be claiming that money. And there are people who abuse the system, and it is right that those people are prosecuted because they're cheating the taxpayer and they're also making things harder for other claimants who are actually being sincere. So I don't say that there is absolutely no problems with waste in the system, but what successive governments have done, and I expect this from the Tories, but what Labour has done under the Starmer administration is really use exactly the same rhetoric as the Tories. You know, whenever we hear about welfare in the press or in government quarters, it's always in negative ways. What I mean by that is claimants are always spoken of in negative terms. You know, it's and we have a member of the government, Angela Rayner, who herself was on benefits. I hope she's having some sort of verbal verbal back and forth with Reeves and Kendall over this, because if anyone in government should be understanding of how that feels to be scapegoated. In fact, Angela Rayner recently had a piece in I think it was the Times Weekend magazine, which was saying that she was, you know, dismissed as a dole scrounger. So if anyone in government should have some empathy, it should be her. Um, there's a few things I want to look at because, you know, ministers, MPs, they're subtle enough not to outright say, "Oh, we think claimants are lazy dole scroungers," and it may well even be generous and say perhaps MPs don't genuinely believe that, but without question, there has been a focus in this country from successive governments to scapegoat the unemployed. And my big concern is we saw what happened with the post office scandal. Now, with the obsession over sanctions, I I really do think there is a risk that it won't be on the sort of sweeping scale of the post office scandal, but there are cases whereby, for example, claimants are sanctioned. Um, and this for a range of reasons. There's many. I think sanctions are massively overused, actually, despite what the Tory graph claims. I think they are hugely overused. But anyway, I refer to the fact they recently had a piece saying there weren't enough people sanctioned. It really made my blood boil, quite honestly, because it just shows where their thinking is. But anyway, um, that my concern is, you know, claimants through no fault of their own may be overpaid, or there may be administrative errors, and then they get sanctioned or accused of benefit fraud. And the problem, what people don't realise, is claimants have limited rights. Now, I think what the wider public look at, those who judge and those who think, what are these people complaining about? They get money from the state. Firstly, free money is a big misconception, even for disability claimants who don't have to actively job search. It's not true that it's just given to them. They have to prove that they are in a position to actually get it. That means going through getting doctor's certification. That's not always an easy process. It's definitely not as easy as some are making it out to be. And once they have that, that isn't something, oh, they could just rest now. You know, that has to be updated. And I speak from people that I know personally. I'm not going to go into details to respect your privacy, but people close to me who are in that position. It isn't a simple thing. And what angers me about a lot of the commentary on this is that people really are led to believe that life for claimants is easy. Now, I don't want to exaggerate and say it's as bad as the situation and the adversity that people face in some parts of the world. But really, in the world's sixth biggest economy, um, we shouldn't forget that the welfare state was set up as a safety net. It wasn't set up to punish people. And I think successive governments, including disgracefully this government, sees it as a mechanism to, get work, otherwise we'll punish you. It's almost like saying, we'll give you help, we'll give you financial support, but we're going to shame you for doing that. I really think that's definitely what the sanction culture is focused on. In this debate, there's very little actually made of the sanction things. We hear about money that's spent and how the council has to allocate this, and the slashes to foreign aid, and we're living in an uncertain time. And I agree with that. There are difficult decisions to be made. We are living in uncertain times, and I've been an advocate for standing up to Russia. I'd be a hypocrite if I said there should be absolutely no cuts whatsoever. But when it comes to this issue, one thing that is routinely ignored is the situation that claimants face. Now, I'm going to read out a piece from the Eye, a few pieces actually, just to give a voice to people who too often are ignored. I mean, our print press, like I said in the last video, definitely veers far more to the right. So you'll never see this sort of piece, this sort of letter in the Sun or the Express or the Mail or the Daily Telegraph or the Times. You just won't see it. This is, bear with me. This is from Nick Prince in Staffordshire, Merlin's letters to the Eye. Isabel Hardman's column, My View, 8th 9th of March, made some good points on why proposed welfare reforms will not work, but failed to mention the effect these will have on claimants. Like so many disabled people, I have been worrying since last year when the last government proposed cuts. Not being able to work is not a choice but a result of multiple disabilities. This is something this Kendall obviously doesn't understand. My words. My recent experience at a job centre was worrying. I did not have the correct paperwork and my request for reasonable adjustment was rejected. Demonising people is not the way to encourage employment. We need to remove the barriers first. And I think many disabled claimants will feel the way Nick does. And this is actually from someone who was in the system, that is, worked for it, Eileen Pollard and Leicester. Reforming welfare cannot be done in isolation. From my years working in the DWP, or the Department for Work and Pensions, DWP, I learned that no amount of government schemes or cuts of benefits will result in a significant shift of people into work, especially for those who've been on benefits for more than a few months. Employers are key to the process. Without their active participation, things won't change. Firstly, employers are never asked to participate in the skills training required. They prefer oven-ready candidates. Unless there's some incentive for employers to take on and train the long-term unemployed, they will always prefer a working candidate. Secondly, work must pay. This doesn't mean reducing already paltry benefits. It means employers offering decent wages. Now, I agree with some of that. But the thing about employers taking on claimants, we need to be careful about workfare programs. I went through that back in 2009. I was sent to a factory because I'd been claiming for a while. I was sent to a factory and basically had to, there was limits on what I could do to work because of health and safety. But I had to go there basically, and I spent the same hours as anyone else, but I wasn't given a salary. Um, and I am very skeptical of employers getting money to kind of take on claimants as part of a work program when there's no guarantee that person's getting a job, because that amounts to exploitation. You're basically told you need to treat this like a job, but there's no guarantee that you're actually going to get the job and be paid for it. Now, let me give an example of actually, there's another piece here, and just bear with me a second, about MPs claiming there's a moral choice here. Labour MPs are divided on this. There's a lot of backbenchers very uneasy about it. but Labour has a moral duty to get the long-term sick into work. This is an abridged version of it. The government also wants to free up money to spend on defence, but Labour MPs insisted the reforms have an ethical underpinning. One MP said there was a really strong moral and progressive case for welfare reform, adding there's this problem of wasted human potential. The MP pointed out that under universal credit, people judged unfit to work receive more than twice those of looking for a job. Well, I'll come back to that point because another MP said they believe many would be completely able to work if the right kind of job was found and they received support. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, said having no prospect of work was for the claimants and bad for the taxpayer. Now, I agree there will be many people who are disabled who do want opportunities, of course they do. It's these flippant statements by the likes of Liz Kendall, thousands who are able to do it. It's callous because it demonstrates a lack of understanding, compassion, and empathy for people who have sincere struggles. Just minimizing it that way, simplifying it that way. Oh, they're fit to work, just send them into work. Um, I really worry about that oversimplification because that serves to demonize disabled claimants. That point, though, about those looking for work getting less than those who do, it shouldn't be one group of claimants against another. Let me put it this way. An adult single claimant who's able to find work that is not a disabled claimant who's on universal welfare, say in their 30s, is eligible for £393 per month. Okay. Now, a big part of the system that is not spoken about is the mandatory 35 hours a week job search. Okay. 35 hours a week. Now, if you work that out to the month, you get paid monthly. It works out at roughly £2.80 an hour if you're treating it like a job. If you sign on, advisors will say, you need to look at 35-hour job search because looking for a job is like having a job. I think that's the way they put it. Now think about that. Roughly £2.80 an hour that works out at. So when people say claimants are just getting something for nothing, the reality is what they're actually getting equates to much less than the effort that there is mandated on them for the work search. At 35 hours a week, I think is absurd. The reason I think it's absurd, it's just not realistic. And what can people do? They can apply for jobs, they can update their CV, they can practice skills in order to help them find a job. They can actively inquire about jobs. But in the end of the day, as I said in another part of this video, if, in fact, what that letter said, employers are looking for oven-ready applicants. Only so much people can do in terms of job searching. I really think whoever came up with this 35 hours a week figure doesn't know what they're talking about. It's just not realistic. I agree that if you're fit and able to find work, there should be some obligations. You should make an effort. I totally agree with that. But one of several things that isn't often spoken about is the sanction culture. This constant threat of sanctions over claimants' backs. That's why it makes me so angry that Rachel Reeves and Liz Kendall are trying to appeal to the Tory press. They're trying to appeal to the right-wing sentiments that say these people are getting free money from the state, we should punish them, we should threaten them with sanctions. It infuriates me because certainly for disabled claimants, for instance, if Kendall's saying they're fit to work, if they refuse a job because they really sincerely feel they cannot do it because of a debilitating condition, they have the threat of sanctions over their head. The sanctions culture is something that really needs to be scrutinised. And the 35 hours a week is absurd. I agree that if you're fit and able to find work, you should make efforts. I agree with that. But 35 hours a week, if you're going to mandate that, at least increase the benefits because it is not the vast amount that people think. Again, do the maths. £393 per month. You're expected to do 35 hours a week job search. That's 140 hours a month. Do the maths. Just do the maths and you'll find that it absolutely doesn't equate to what you would be paid in a job. But there's other areas to it. You can apply and apply and apply. And in the end of the day, the employer is always going to give a preference to someone who has more experience. Now, I'm not saying the system is entirely bad. There is some useful training programs offered. And job sites nowadays, there is quite a lot of listings on them in particular fields. But if you have a background in a particular field and that isn't widely advertised, there's limits. So I think this random figure, 35 hours a week job search, we never hear about that. We never hear about the sanction culture. All we hear about is there's thousands of people who are able to work and they're not working, and so they're scapegoated. I think it's a disgrace that Kendall and Reeves are doing this. That they are, I mean, Kendall actually wanted to get access to airlines to hand over information about suspected abuse of welfare, not even proven. That's why I cited the postmaster scandal. I'm going to wrap this up soon, but that was today's headline in the eye. Just in case we run out of time and you can do a freeze shot. So the focus is on cutting benefits, scapegoating claimants. That's what we're seeing under the Labour government, and I am furious about it. Now, I'll close with this. My own experience of the system hasn't been overtly bad. I have to be honest about that. On a personal basis, most advisors have been professional and civil. I can't say that they haven't. But there is definitely a sense that if you complain, there's a threat of sanctions. If you're legitimately late, say you've had a problem with local transport system, there's a threat of sanctions. There's a constant threat of sanctions. I think that's wrong. That causes a lot of anxiety for a lot of people. I'm not saying if there are people who are really, really abusing the system, they shouldn't face some sort of consequences. They should. But there's far, far too big a focus on sanctions. And the right-wing press, shamefully, unprofessionally, fail to mention what claimants actually go through. They never ask claimants. And I think it's contemptible and callous the way the Daily Tory graph, and the Sun, the Mail, and the Express talk about claimants. And Kendall and Reeves play to that. To his credit, Ed Davey has spoken out against the cuts to his backbench Labour MPs, but there's others who are defending Kendall and Reeves. I recently spoke to my MP, not on this issue about mutual support for Ukraine. It wasn't the right occasion to bring this up, but I just feel disgusted that Labour is using the same language as the Tories and going down the same path. And they can frame it whatever way they want. They're trying to help people into work. Like I say, some of it is worthy, there's useful training programs and so on. But the 35 hours a week thing and the sanction culture, that is really, really regressive. It's just, to me, callous. Threatening people who are already facing anxiety from the anxiety that comes from unemployment, from not having a steady income. The money that people get is helpful, but it is not the vast amounts that people think. Again, I leave it to you to do the maths. £393 a month, 140 hours mandated job search. I think, to be honest, most advisors know that people realistically can't do that. Myself, I tried my best because I didn't want to be sanctioned, but it's very difficult. There's only so much you can do. You can apply for jobs, you can travel to look for jobs, you can make inquiries, you can update your CV, you can practice cover letters. But even when you add all that up, it realistically isn't going to add up to 35 hours a week. And if it did, at least pay people more. If you're threatening people to uphold that 35 hours a week, at least make the welfare money equate to it. It doesn't. The thing too about, people choose to sign on, I suspect many, many people don't. But they're in a really difficult position because a lot of jobs don't pay well enough, so they feel they've no choice but to sign on. But, who's going to want to be in a situation where they have the constant threat of sanctions over their head and who, um, you know, I've said my personal experience of advisors has been okay, but I'm sure there are advisors out there who do get a little kick of talking down to people, having a little bit of power over people. I haven't yet seen it, but the film Daniel Blake really, really looked at this topic. So I'm very disappointed and angry with Labour for trying to out-Tory the Tories on this. Excuse me. Whatever way they try to frame it. What I'd like to see is an end to the sort of language scapegoats claimants. An end, not an end, but at least a massive reduction of big reduction, reasonable, a big reduction in the sanction culture, the constant threat of sanctions. People getting threatening letters from the DWP about telling them that they're fit to work, or advisors telling claimants, if you don't do the 35 hours a week, you'll be sanctioned, which means threatening to withhold payments, this sort of thing. It's just that 35 hours a week, it's not realistic. It's just not. So that needs to be brought down significantly. The thing is, you have to fill in a journal. So people might say, oh, you could easily fake that. Not really. You have to actually put into that journal what you're actively doing. They can check that. And like I say, there's a problem for anyone whistleblowing. Anyone who wants to complain about the system, there isn't really a recourse. Because if they do, they feel, okay, if I complain, I'm going to get sanctioned. I think claimants are treated pretty much, I don't want to say like criminals. I can't say it's the same as prison, but I've never been in prison. I can't. That would be wrong to make that comparison. But um, I am sick and tired of claimants being scapegoated by successive governments because they're an easy target. So I know Reeves has a difficult job. I know she needs to allocate everything, but I just want to see much, much less scapegoating of those who can't defend themselves. Really, it's not given enough of a voice in this country. So often we hear this topic debated without unemployed people and disabled claimants actually getting a voice in it, and I'm sick of that.